What's up, guys? This is Jeff Easterling with 343 Industries. You guys may know me better as @GrimBrother1. I'm actually here in the studio with a couple of very special friends of mine that I get the pleasure of working with on an everyday basis. And I want to go ahead and introduce them to you. We've got Jeremy. Jeremy, say hi to everyone.
What up, guys? How you doing?
And what is your full name and what do you do?
My name is Jeremy Patenaude. I'm one of the writers on the franchise team, and so I help out with some of the overarching fiction across the universe, and I work with the books and stuff like that.
And Tiffany, introduce the world to yourself.
Hi, I'm Tiffany O'Brien. I work on the consumer products team. I'm category manager for the whole production side of consumer products, but I do a lot of work on all the novels and books.
Awesome. So if you are still listening and still interested, you are probably wondering, what in the world are we doing here? Well, we're actually just having a little fun today, and we kind of wanted, instead of doing like a blog type thing like we normally do, wanted to give a little audio treat experiment and have a little bit of a round table discussion on telling Halo stories through our novels. And kind of the process involved there and some of the things that we're looking forward to actually coming up in the future. Halo is a huge franchise. Anybody that has kind of listened and watched our Vidoc and marketing and stuff, you know, we throw around things like it's a transmedia franchise and there's lots of different ways to experience a story, and that's very true. Obviously, Halo's primary mode of storytelling for the past 15 years has been through the video game medium, but one of our other favorite ways to tell stories, in fact, technically, the very first way we told a Halo story was actually through a book. And so we want to talk about just that process in general. And also, we've seen a lot of questions. I've actually seen it on social media and the forums several times for some reason. Just in the past month, as far as like people kind of jumping in and be like, I'm really interested in the books, but what order do I read them in, and which one should I focus on?
That's a good question.
Yeah, so we'll talk about that. So let's just start off, telling Halo stories through books instead of games. Jeremy, can you guys just give an overview about like what you maybe think are some of the strengths of telling some of the stories in our universe through books?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and I'll use Halo as an example, to be perfectly honest. When I first started engaging with the franchise, it was actually not through the books. It was through the games. And so for the first game that came out, I played it like crazy. And then about a year later, one of my friends that was also a Halo player introduced me to the Fall of Reach, and I was blown away by the fact that there was such an intricate backstory already woven into the universe. And that's sort of what my team and Tiffany's team have been trying to propagate, is that same sort of feeling of moving out from the game space into a very, very vast universe that's been just sort of expanded in every possible direction, in terms of themes, in terms of characters, in terms of locations, so that when fans come at it from a novel perspective, they're actually getting a full-orbed experience that the game can't really deliver because of the nature of the game, and all the things that go along with that. So, yeah, I mean, that was my introduction into at least Halo's storytelling in terms of novels, and that's how I see it.
And it's funny, we talk a ways about the bigger the universe expands, in some ways, the more difficult it becomes, because you always want to be able to let new fans kind of jump on board and feel like they're not missing anything, but you also want to reward kind of that investment of longtime fans. And so even just picking the stories that we tell can be kind of crazy. And Tiffany, you work not only with some of the creative, but the lion's share of what your responsibility is in a lot of ways in the overarching responsibility of like what kind of stories do we tell, and like how does it all fit into even the bigger picture from a production standpoint and marketing and timelines and everything. Can you talk a little bit about your perspective on telling stories through novels?
Well, first, I think novels are a lot more emotional and you get more connected when you're reading them. And for us, I know Jeremy and I always like to find an author that we really like and also likes Halo. And we like to have a conversation with that author to find out what story they really want to tell. and we try to give them a sandbox that works with our game and also gives them the freedom to really explore what they've always wanted to explore.
It's interesting, actually, that you say sandbox, because it actually works in many ways just like the games itself. Like we talk about, fans are used to hearing sandbox, but they're used to thinking it in the fact of, oh, I've got warthogs and needlers, and I can jump and do what. But the universe itself is a sandbox as far as just sheer creativity goes. When you talk about like the settings and the characters, those are essentially the sandbox that some of these other creatives can use. Could you talk about how we onboard even authors? Because there are times when when we here internally are obviously responsible for some of that story creating and creating new characters, sometimes in big ways or sometimes even in little small ways to explain the nature of a weapon or a side character. But a lot of times we encounter authors, Greg Bear was a great example, who was a very renowned science fiction author, but he's not necessarily a longtime Halo person. So what is the process like trying to onboard even authors?
Well, Jeremy put together
loaded questions.
No, he put together a really awesome document that basically gives the whole snapshot of the universe with a bunch of videos. And I think that allows any author, even if they know Halo or if they don't know Halo or need a refresher on Halo, can go through and get snippets of the stories and then decide what is the most interesting to them. Yeah. And so that's our first step, is to send them that cute little email. And then it's really, 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 really long. But there's a lot of links and it's easy. And then they come back to us and tell us what they thought was interesting.
Yeah. And it's important to also stress that, like, when we're looking at authors, one of the top thing that we want to look for is someone who either is a fan of Halo, like a longtime fan, or has a deep, profound interest in telling a story in our universe because they know it so well. And Halo is actually a lot more difficult to tell a story like in that universe than I think a lot of people realize, because there's certain aesthetics that go along with like 26th century military that aren't ubiquitous across every science fiction franchise out there. You think they are on a surface level, maybe they're the same between different franchises, but they're not. And there's certain stylistic elements that can really get off course if they're not sort of tuned into that. And so that is a little bit of hand-holding, but a lot of it is just finding an author who knows Halo. If they know Halo, they're going to organically and spontaneously be able to tell stories in that universe in a way that doesn't really require us. We just need to get out of the way and really give them the freedom and the guardrails to sort of make sure the story is coherent and cohesive.
But also like enthusiastic about just telling our story. So Greg Bear's a pretty good example of someone who just really was interested in Halo, and we kind of gave him a part of the universe that we had never really explored before, but he's really good at creating that sci-fi story and world. So
I would imagine you peg certain authors, especially even from a stylistic standpoint, that there are going to be authors that have strengths and weaknesses in telling certain types of stories, because you've got, again, it's one of the blessings and the curses of this universe is there are so many different kind of theaters to tell those stories in. You've got your boots on the ground band of brothers, very singular, intimate character pieces, but then you also have your bombastic, epic space opera style pieces, and somebody like Bear, who is very almost more flowery, Tolkien-esque, crazy, lots of syllables and lots of flowery words, versus other authors who are more, military fiction focused, perhaps. Sure,
yeah.
And sometimes those authors bring us in a space where we've never really explored, like Denning doing kind of a mystery kind of situation. That's not something we normally do, but I think he really brought a whole different perspective.
Yeah, crime scene investigator in Halo. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the things that I love about Denning, and about just the fact that our universe is so robust, and this is just the nature of the last 15 years, that folks can step in and they can really put their spin on it. And that's what Denning did with Last Light, and what he's doing with Retribution right now, which is just creating this aspect of our universe that's never been explored before. But because of the breadth of the universe in terms of its content and the different locations and characters, it's absolutely something that would be expected, but just not something that we've ever displayed before. So that's one of the benefits to having authors who know how to tell a certain type of story come in and basically put their spin on the universe that we hadn't previously ever even encountered.
And we're closing in. I think we're either at or about to pass the 20 novel mark. We're
Wow.
we're right in that zone, at least plus minus. In the past few years, I know fans have kind of even experienced a boon in that respect. Especially, I remember us releasing the novel listing for 2015, I think it was, in one of the issues of Cannon Fodder, and it was just like boom, 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 this story here and this. And I remember seeing reaction videos and forum threads of all the excitement, which was really, really cool to see. And I mean, we've worked with over, again, right around 20 novels with several amazing authors, all with various, talents and like stylistic preferences, and real recently we released another anthology similar to what we did with Evolutions, Fractures, and man, Fractures was awesome, and getting to work with some new authors, but also acting as a springboard for future stories to kind of come from that as well.
Yeah.
Well, and we got to kind of we added Joseph Staten. His story was in there, and Tobias Buckell. So you've got authors from previous novels getting to retell their story, but jump into the Halo universe, which is cool.
And speaking of Tobias, that's next up on deck is Halo Envoy. Yeah. And April 25th. If I'm not mistaken.
Pretty exciting.
I'm super excited. I know it's hard because we all work like books ahead. Some of the fans asking me about something, and I legitimately had to think. I'm like, I actually don't remember because it's about to come out, but it's like 2 books back. For It's,
I got a file on my desk right now that I need to review for later on this year, for late this year. So I'm always out of sync with what's going on.
There are some things, some characters I really fell in love with Envoy, and we don't want to spoil too much because it's about to come out, and some things that long-time fans I think are going to encounter in there that they'll find very pleasantly surprising, which I'm looking forward to. And we mentioned earlier that a lot of people are asking, what is the recommended reading order, which I think is a great question. And I think everybody, there are some different answers, and I've actually changed my answer. I remember, years ago, I was kind of more like, no, you read them in fictionally chronological order. I mean, that's how I have them on my shelf. I have them organized in fictionally chronological order.
That's difficult because some of them skip ahead.
Yes, it is. I mean, even the very first book covers decades, or you get the things like some of our anthologies, and the stories take place all over. And I remember, when I was younger, talking to my dad about asking what order would you read the Chronicles of Narnia in, because that's a series just within one series that that jumps around, and he talked to me about like why the release order works the way it does, because even though you're going back and forth in time, there are things that are set up in certain ways. And even if you just watch like in a film, you'll have flashbacks. Well, they put that flashback in the middle because you're being told that information a certain way. So I think I've changed my tune. I think like new time readers, first time readers kind of especially would benefit from reading things in a release order. But that's just me. Do you guys have similar thoughts or differing thoughts?
My first one was Cryptum, so not the first one.
Welcome to it.
The deep end.
Then I went back to Fall of Reach, and then I kind of went back and forth between books. I think Cryptum's nice because if you don't know anything about Halo, you can read it and get it.
It's just a good science fantasy novel at that point,
But Fall of Reach kind of gives you a good base, right? And then if you want to switch around, I think you can.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of funny because no one ever asks. So when I get asked the question, it's always like, I'm working on this book or this part of the game. What story should I read to sort of inform that? So like here, that conversation's different because I'm picking out a specific story that this is 26th century Marines, in the trenches fighting against the Covenant. And so I can tailor it that way. But when it comes to like telling them broadly, it really depends on the person, because I think a lot of people would like to start chronologically if they can, but maybe in the human era, so they get their footing in like sort of the standard fare This is what it is to live as a human in this time frame with the covenant.
Because it'd be very different than, like, let's say starting with like Broken Circle comes to mind, because there are no humans.
There aren't,
Like, at all. So that would be an odd one to try to maybe introduce yourself to the universe. It'd be a really cool look at aliens, but with zero context.
Well, the first four
what
novels
that means.
chronologically would really put you, I mean, they're important and significant and foundational, but they would put you at a disadvantage for understanding the sort of the culmination of the universe, which is right in the center of what we're all working on right now. So, yeah, I mean, I would say that. I'd also say that I think the perspective of looking at it in chronological order is good, but it defeats the fact that the franchise itself is acting as a storyteller in evolving how the layers are put one on another in actual publication release. In the sense that what you were just sort of tapping on earlier, there are elements of Fall of Reach which are very raw because they're at the foundation of the universe in terms of sort of the way that they were set up. But there's things that have evolved along the way, like the introduction of the elites and different other components that sort of had to be tailored as we sort of grew across the franchise in different directions. And I think that's an advocate for reading it in publication order, because you're starting out at a base sort of foundational level in terms of the interpretation and the understanding of the universe, and then as it expands from one book to another, even if it goes linearly in terms of chronology, it's expanding in terms of tone. It's expanding in terms of what do we expect the audience to know 15 years into this.
It's like the book's knowledge themselves is growing along with you.
Because the franchise is really a cipher for what the authors are saying. And therefore, like when a book comes in for us, I'm familiar with, what a fan at 15 years, 16, 17 years into our franchise's history will understand and process. And that's not the same question that the early authors were asking or the earlier publishers were asking, because they didn't have that time frame. And I think that's important in evaluating how you sort of tackle a franchise, especially if you're new with it.
But if you've played a lot of the games, or if, let's say, you're playing ODST and you read New Blood at the same time, both experiences are enhanced, because they're complementary.
Correct.
So the same thing happens with if you're reading, playing Halo 4, the Kilo 5 trilogy is really nice because you've got all this stuff going on, introducing different, enemies.
You brought up actually a great point. That's a great example with ODST, because each of those products, if you just play the game and don't read the book, you miss out on nothing in the game. And if you didn't play the game and actually just read the book, not playing the game actually doesn't mess your book experience up. In fact, the New Blood in particular, because it does a good job of actually kind of looping you into what happened in the game. But it's a great example of standing alone. They're awesome, but peanut butter and chocolate, those things together, like that's, you really now all of a sudden have a very enhanced experience and perspective, which is what we can, I think, ultimately hope for.
And that's what we try. We try to make sure that there's not too heavily interdependencies like created in there, so that they can live on their own. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, just lastly, have a little fun. Any particular favorite stories that we've done over the years? We'll keep it isolated to like the novel realm to try to make it a little bit easier. I'll start.
Okay.
Like Cryptum and Silentium are right up there, and for different reasons. I just think absolutely some of my just favorite books.
Primordium's my favorite of those.
Really?
Oh, wow.
Oh, that's
for
interesting.
Sure.
Oh my goodness.
That one's for sure.
That's interesting. But I'm also a huge fan from the non Forerunner side, the more modern side. I love Contact Harvest.
Yeah.
Contact Harvest is
right there with you.
Is like that to me is, if you weren't to start with the Fall of Reach, Contact Harvest to me may be that other awesome best place to start. As, I've never read anything, or I maybe don't even know much. It's a first contact story still. It's like you've got incredible, like larger than life characters. You've got these mysteries and reveals and things that that are mysterious to you if you're just coming into it. But if you do have the experience of playing the game, now all of a sudden takes on an entirely new meaning.
Also, like they present these massive backstories of things that you had only hinted to you in the game space. And so being able to see
stuff with AIs and
AIs, I mean, there's so much stuff in there, and it's been built on since then. Like there's even a mention of mendicant bias in those early in Contact Harvest, which isn't something that's elaborated till quite a while later in Halo 3 and then in some of the stuff that we worked on with the Greg Bear trilogy. But it's just interesting to see the backstory that was thrown in there, which has become really the foundation for all these different other layers that we've loaded on top of it. Contact Harvest is definitely one of those.
Awesome.
What about you, Tiffany?
And
some of my favorites haven't been released yet, but those don't count.
Man.
I was actually going to say the same thing. Like the book I just read was actually very high.
I know one in particular that,
My favorite is the Kilo 5 trilogy.
Okay.
Especially Thursday War. But I also just love Jewel Madama. And,
Madama's so nice.
The Hurgox.
Rest in peace, too soon.
Pretty much all the Hurgox are my favorite.
It's true. You do love
I really do.
Hurgox.
They're adorable.
This is a floaty, gassy little cuddly
In my head,
bumpkin.
they're adorable. I don't want to think about what they really look like.
Yeah. I think
awesome slimy pets.
For me, it's kind of interesting while you were saying that, because I was thinking about like, okay, what was when I was actually just a fan, and it was before I even was working on this stuff firsthand. I was thinking about like the first, I loved Fall of Reach, but I remember spending a lot of time on First Strike, which is interesting because that usually slips under the radar. But First Strike for me was I think first exposure to Spartans, really operating in a military way on Reach in the sense that they weren't training. It wasn't, some of the recruitment stuff that happened early on during the Spartan 2 program. And it was them fighting for the defensive Reach. So I think that was, in terms of historically, like my foundational story, just some of the stuff that happens there. And there's some craziness that happens in that book. That's wild. But the bottom line is like some of those scenes on Reach when they're defending the orbital generator, or when
dude, just the descent, knife 2-6, the longsword, protecting them on the way down on the Fred leads them down on the Pelican, like.
It's pretty wild. And we've basically, like in the last book that we worked on that just went back to the author for a final editing pass, we mentioned something that happens in that book, echoing an event basically that one of the characters in that book remembers, and it still haunts him what happened, that scene. So yeah, I'll just drop that in there. It's cool. It's cool to be able to layer stuff like that.
Yeah.
Later on, as we sort of develop and expand the fiction in different directions, or double down on areas that we know that fans like, it's good to be able to call back to some of the stuff that we remember and resonates with us, and be able to weave those things in there, hopefully in a way that's compelling.
Well, with hopefully your guys' appetite sufficiently whetted, we're going to go ahead and close there. And don't forget that our next book is coming out very, very soon. April 25th is Halo Envoy by Tobias Buckell. You'll definitely want to grab that, and it's available all of the normal ways in touchable paperback and downloadable digital form and audiobook. So make sure you grab that and keep up with us. You can just follow us at Halo on Twitter and check out Halo Waypoint, and we've got lots more goodies to come. So we thank you for joining us today and look forward to talking to you soon.